So this is so cool. So we're doing two parts, and I've got Leah here. I want her to co-host with me. We're talking about substance abuse and ADHD, and this is like a big thing. There's a lot of myths around there. There's interesting ways that it can play in with our dopamine and things like that. And it was just such a great topic. And I wanted somebody with a really incredible story who's also an amazing coach and friend to come on and share her story and then kind of have input as well. We're gonna introduce Leah, and we did not like rehearse. Both of us have ADHD, and we want this to feel really like real and raw. So we're not overly scripted. And so I have a couple questions for her, and just to learn about her. And then I want to go through like some of the myths and some of the stats around substance abuse and addiction and things like that. Yeah, it's gonna be really cool. So I want to start out with Leah. And so because we didn't script this, Leah, if there's ever a question you don't want to answer, let me know. But you're pretty open with your recovery journey and everything, and it's just incredible. So I want to hand it to you just so we can get to know you first, like your bio, because you've done like ridiculously amazing things in real estate, and you have ADHD, and so I want to learn that, and then next to your recovery story, if you want to share that.
Yeah, more than happy to. So thank you for having me, and apologies for being a minute late there. I was coming off of a leadership council meeting. First and foremost, I do want to set the record straight. I am not diagnosed with ADHD, and I don't believe that I have ADHD. I want to be very clear
Oh,
about that.
okay.
Just to be fully transparent, I don't want to get off of here and everyone be like, that girl lied to our faces. And
Why do we get along so well and talk so fast?
because we're just, I do have a difficult time staying still, and I do go all the time. However, I don't have any reason to believe at this stage of my life, at least, that I have ADHD.
Well, that's right.
And yet a ton of people with substance abuse disorder suffer from that as well. And tons of my friends, and a whole big old chunk, if not most of them, my clients also have ADHD or some form of ADD or something along those lines. Thank you, Carmen, immediately for complimenting the dog. He eats up every compliment you could possibly throw his way. That is my office assistant in the background, and hopefully he will be still and quiet and behave and do what he needs to do. My name is Leah Lemberg Welsh. Officially, I did officially change my name, although it's still Lemberg 90% of the places you'll find me. I have been sober since January 9th, 2009. We're sitting in July. Maybe I do have a touch of ADD. And am really, really grateful for what that means in my life, which means complete abstinence and sobriety from anything mood or mind altering. I haven't had anything mood or mind altering since January 9th, 2009. And we can get into the weeds with that story and that background as well. I got into real estate in about 2015. I had come out of a master's program with an obscure degree in Spanish linguistics, because that's what you get when you're about to get into real estate, that I clearly put to really good use. Not at all. And realized that someone in my relationship at the time needed to start making money, and that it was going to end up needing to be me. And so I got into real estate and quickly joined onto a team, was a buyer's agent, a listing agent, eventually the director of sales for that team. And around that time got into coaching, around the same time that I was the director of sales. And then eventually left that team, hired out my replacement, and have been a full-time coach since 2019. So that's kind of the condensed version, Tyler, just to kind of to wet the whistle there, and we can go literally in any direction you are interested in. I am no holds barred.
Yeah, that's great. Yeah, I mean, you're humble too. You've just done a lot of big things, and like if I need to execute on something or ideas, you're the one I call. So I'd love to hear if you're willing to share like your recovery story.
Yeah.
If you'd like to share that.
Absolutely. So I started using, mine is a drug heavy story too. So if that triggers anyone, I want to give you a heads up. Again, I'm no holds barred. I'm not going to leave out any specifics, although I'm not going to get gruesome and gross, I promise. We could do that offline if you wanted to. So I started using drugs when I was very young. I was very, very interested in drugs from a ridiculously young age. I would fake a cough. I would get this like bronchitis-like cough that I would fake so that I could get cough medicine from my parents. Don't know where that really came from or stemmed from, but it was something that preschool age. I can remember doing this in the back of my dad's car and him turning around and being like, stop. It's enough. That's weird. Don't do that. But I would do it until I would get cough medicine. I first got really into a drug. My first drug of choice was smoking weed. I was very into that when I was 11 or 12. And it was a life-changing moment for me, genuinely. The first time that I was able to get high, it felt like everything finally clicked into place and that I was where I needed to be and was thinking the way that I needed to be thinking. I grew up in a tumultuous home, which I'm sure there was some running away that I was experiencing as well, running away physically, not physically, but mentally. And it just progressed from there. From that point on, and I know that sounds kind of silly, like at 11 or 12 from that point on, but genuinely, from that point on, I took my first opiate when I was in the 7th grade, and that was another life-changing click moment. And was off to the races with opiates, and really anything you'd put in front of me from then on. When I was a sophomore in high school, I was a veterinary technician. I was very serious about becoming a veterinarian. That was my goal in life, was to be a veterinarian. And I grew up in a very small town, so I had the opportunity to work as a registered veterinary technician at a young age, and was actually doing really cool stuff like helping with surgeries and keeping track of inventory and genuinely taking care of animals. It wasn't just kennel tech. Um, I mentioned keeping up with inventory. I started to steal from the veterinary's office that I worked for, and was stealing controlled substances and eventually needles and bringing those things home to experiment with as well. That then led, at that time in rural North Carolina, where I'm from, there was a massive opiate epidemic happening like there was across most of the country. And at that time, it was shifting towards heroin. And when I found heroin, everything just went downhill quick. Within a year and a half, I had stolen hundreds of thousands of dollars from friends, family, and employers. And pretty quickly, again, within a year and a half, my dad, who had gotten sober 4 years before I did and was working a 12-step program and had a very solid sense of sobriety, plucked me out of school, and I was a senior in high school at this point, and said, we need to figure out what's going on. We're taking you somewhere to get some help. And I was sent to a 1-year, long-term, very intense treatment center. And despite many of its shortcomings, it stuck. And so January 9th, 2009, I was sent down to treatment. And despite all of my kicking and screaming and begging for people to come and pick me up and saying this isn't going to work for me, here we are.
Wow. That's amazing. And you've done such big things too. And what you said in the recovery center, you're kicking and screaming. At what point were you glad to be there? When did that change?
I don't know if I would say that I was ever glad to be. There was a lot of weird stuff that went down in that recovery center, genuinely, and I am grateful for it because it did get me here. And yet, I can tell you that it took about 6 months of me genuinely saying, "This is not going to work for me. This is not going to work for me. This is not going to work for me." There was a conversation with a counselor, that started to shift my mentality. We were sitting out on the front porch of that house, and she said, "Is it possible that there is a solution that you're not considering?" Because in my mind, the solution was, you just can't use drugs and alcohol, and you just have to white knuckle it for the rest of your life, right? And that's abstinence. You just have to remain abstinent for the rest of your life. And her idea was, is it possible that you're equating sobriety with abstinence? And is it possible that these are actually two different things? And you just don't have a definition clarity yet. And there was a moment where I thought to myself, my dad, who I knew to be just as bad of an addict as I was, there's no way he's been living white knuckling it for the last 4 years. So maybe there is something different that I haven't fully considered, and maybe I could remain open to that. So my commitment was, I will do everything that you tell me to do from here on out, just to prove to you that it won't work. And that was a shifting moment, genuinely.
Stephanie said it's amazing. You had to have a good support system once you got home then, right?
Mm-hmm. Great question, Stephanie. So what's so interesting is I was adamant about going home after the first 28 days stint that I was in the inpatient program. And yet what I did was I wrote to my family. The whole time I was in inpatient, I was trying to convince people that I could just go home and do some of what I was doing. Maybe not all of it. Fine. I agree. Maybe heroin is too much. Fine. But surely I could still do like this set of substances and that'd be okay. And you can drug test me and it'll be fine. Everything will be fine. And I got an all caps written, like typed out letter from my dad saying that, and I hope that cursing is okay here. I won't use too heavy of language. You can do whatever the hell you want, but you ain't coming back here if that's what you're doing. And I was like, oh, well, okay. Well, that's interesting. And at this point, too, he also informed me in all caps in this typed out letter, um, because my goal was I'm going to come back home. I'll finish high school. Hadn't finished high school yet. I'm going to keep working at the vet's office. I trained horses, which that's a whole nother side story. And I was going to keep doing that. And so all of this was included in the letter of like, here's the plan. It'll be fine. And he said, the horses are sold. Your work knows that you've been stealing from you and they've agreed not to press charges, but you can't go back. And your high school damn sure doesn't want anything to do with you. So, no, go clean yourself up. And I'm going to say, Stephanie, that that was probably the best support I could have possibly gotten from my family at that point. And I remained in Georgia because I went out of state for treatment. I'm from North Carolina. They shipped me down to Georgia. I remained in Georgia. I went through a year-long treatment program and then enrolled into a college that was in the same city. There was a massive young people's group of people because all of us were getting shipped to this treatment center, all of us young folk, right? And there was a really strong young people's community of people staying and getting and remaining sober. So my network really was not my family. It was not home. It was this group that I had found in the city that I was shipped off to.
Jennifer had a comment that her stepdaughter thinks the same thing every time as well, that February she admitted she doesn't just have mental issues but addiction. She was on like 36 different meds. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. It's hard. It's so hard because what ends up happening, at least for myself as someone who suffers from substance abuse disorder, is the drugs, the alcohol, it is my solution. It is the thing that allows me to feel okay. It is my medication, right? So whether it's prescribed by a doctor or it's something I'm getting off the street, to me, it's my solution until all of a sudden it's not. And so it's hard to differentiate between, but I felt so much better. I was able to function better. I was less depressed. I was less weird. I was less socially awkward. I was less whatever when I was getting high until all of a sudden I crossed a line and there's no going back. My dad, who I've mentioned, is also sober. We have a great working relationship now. We did not for many years. I just thought he was insane. But he has a lot of someone said boomer font, which yes, all caps is boomer font. He also has boomer phrases, which I adore. I love his phrases. One of his phrases, because we both garden, my dad and I, is once a cucumber is pickled, it can never go back to being a cucumber. And I'm pickled, right? So like, I have to be real careful about what it is that I test myself with when it comes to like medications that I'm prescribed and whatnot. Anyway.
Well, and so with ADHD, right, and addiction, there's some overlap.
Yeah.
And one of those things is like so with ADHD, right, we have the dysregulation of dopamine and norepinephrine in our reward pathway. And then when we look at, I want to do a screen share of like the science of addiction or how that works, right? We have basically it's a release of dopamine, right? So if we already have lower levels or they're not regulated, and Leah, you said like it made you feel okay, which I think people can relate to whether they have ADHD or not, right? So when you take the substance, it plays on the neurotransmitter dopamine, right? And then the hippocampus responds to the dopamine by recording memories of pleasure. And then now you're associating that thing with the reward center, right? Which is tied to executive function, which is like do the thing. And then repeated exposure causes nerve cells in the nucleus in the prefrontal cortex, right, to seek out more of that for more of the reward. And that's the happy chemical, right? It's the thing that makes us do things. And so it makes sense why with ADHD and just anyone, right, why this would play on, but why specifically we'd be more susceptible to that. And that being said, if you want some stats, adults with ADHD are 2 to 3 times more likely to develop a substance abuse disorder. And then up to 50% people in treatment for substance abuse have undiagnosed ADHD. And then 25 to 30% of individuals with substance abuse disorder also meet the criteria for adult ADHD, like hands down, really easy. And it's used to self-medicate, right? And alcohol, nicotine, and marijuana and stimulants are the most common. And like a lot of us can self-medicate if we don't have a diagnosis. It's like there's less dopamine and we need to regulate, and there's no answers and we feel like we're failing, and then you find something and oh my gosh, so it makes sense. I saw your comment, like I'm she said I could cry, this makes so much sense. Like I feel emotional too, because there's just so much shame around stuff. If you don't understand, it's not that you're bad, it's not that you're not disciplined. Like there's way more to the story, and you can see like recovery is so possible.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
Yeah, I mean, tons of my friends who are in recovery also struggle with ADHD. Absolutely. And then there's a difficult balance of, several of them struggled specifically with amphetamines, right? Or methamphetamine, for example, too. I've got lots of friends who are recovering from that. And I use terms like junkie and meth head, and I don't mean that offensively. It's just what we say to ourselves as about ourselves. And so if that offends anyone, I do apologize. I apologize in advance. And so if my friends who struggled with methamphetamine, amphetamines, cocaine, any of those types of substances, then realize that like, oh my gosh, I actually also have ADHD, it kind of puts you in a bind of what do I choose to do here? Because my drug of choice could also be a thing that could help me regulate this. What's cool, I will say, is it does seem like psychiatrists in general seem to be getting a little bit more savvy with how to help those who have ADHD and substance abuse recovery issues, and are looking for methods of what medications may help if you do choose to become medicated versus what medications might we steer you better away from so that you don't end up in a sticky situation.
And that's a good thing too, because one of my really good friends, two like best friends from college, I thought I lost them, both heroin. And I mean, I had to grieve them because it was years. And one of them went into inpatient, gave up her phone for 2 years, and now I'm going to cry, but like, is this amazing counselor and like sober and just changing lives. And I'm so proud of her. And like, I got my friend back, and then my other friend was lost for like 5 years. And like, now like we're hanging out and totally sober. It's incredible to see. I mean, my first friend would take anything under the sun, like literally didn't even care, didn't even ask what it was. And to see what is possible is just incredible. And then when we look at like, because I remember both of them have ADHD, both likely have autism as well. And so they're working with their provider, and they have non-stimulant ADHD meds. And so one is on that, and the other one is able to be on stimulants, and it's fine. And that's a choice with your provider, because sometimes it can balance out that reward system, and you're less likely, to relapse because you're not trying to self-medicate. Or for my other friend, it's too risky. She's not touching anything. Like she needs something that builds up in the system over 1 to 2 months, or she's not going to touch it. Because if it's something that you get infected from, game over. So you can go on stimulants depending on what what you used. So both are possible.
Yeah, 100%. And even for someone like myself, where my drug of choice were not stimulants, I would not turn away a stimulant, right? And so like I had no problem saying like, yeah, sure, I'll take that too. So it is something to be aware of. Even if your drug of choice wasn't X, Y might still affect you,
Right,
so.
right. Yep. And what's interesting is there's a lot of overlap between ADHD and substance abuse in general. And so this was just like fascinating to me. So, one, impulsivity, because there's people that I'm like, hey, I wonder if they have ADHD, right? And they might just have substance abuse, and there's some overlap. So impulsivity, sometimes with ADHD, and if you are more predisposed to substance abuse, you can have more impulsivity stuff, right? And then like reward seeking and dopamine behavior, like adrenaline junkies, or just going for more dopamine things, heightened need for stimulation and novelty seeking behaviors. That's something as well. Self-regulation. So executive function, like the ability to plan, organize, regulate emotions, that can be on both sides. Another thing, like all or nothing thinking, that's really common in substance abuse world, and then also with ADHD, right? Like It's either good or bad. It's either this person's safe or not safe. Like I either do it perfect or I don't do it at all, like kind of extreme thinking. And then like self-medication, ADHD or substance abuse, like lots around, we can turn to self-medication to self-soothe if there's something going on. And then both ADHD and addiction have strong genetic components. So family history, you're more likely to have either one depending on your family history. And so it's interesting how like they're two different things, but there's such a combination, of both.
For sure. For sure. Yeah, a lot of those things. And it's so funny when you popped up that graphic of the brain and showing how addiction affects the brain or
Yeah.
how substance abuse affects the brain. There's some comments, and I'd be curious how this overlaps with the ADHD community specifically as well. There's some phrases that we use in 12-step rooms that like play the tape through, right? And the issue with phrases like that is I rewrite the tape. Like if someone tells me don't use, think about it, like think about what's going to happen if you were to use, and play the tape through to the end, right? Because we have euphoric recall. I can remember the good stuff, but I don't remember how the good stuff ends up turning into horrible stuff. Play the tape through. But my tape gets rewritten. I write the end of the tape to be, yeah, sure, it sucked last time at the end, but it's going to be different this time. I know it's going to be different this time. And so if I'm not in a good headspace where my routine and my spiritual practice and like all of these things that I utilize to keep myself like on the emotional balance beam, if that's not on, if I'm not doing what I need to be doing, the playing the tape through method, it's too little too late, right? The euphoric recall is just too high.
So you have certain things that you keep in place that then you need those staples to then maintain that
Yeah.
barrier to not.
Yeah.
And would you mind expanding on what those are?
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And someone just asked in the perfect timing too from Carmen too, asked about, am I still in a 12-step group? So when I got sober, the treatment center that I went through was 12-step based. As are most, or at least at that time. I don't know if it still is that way or not, but I would assume it is. Um, and that was the thing that I bucked so hard for so long. My dad got sober through 12-step, and I was like, hell no, we're not doing that. I'm not interested. And that was the thing that I said, I will do everything that I am told to do just to prove that it won't work for me. And it did work for me. I stayed heavily involved in 12-step meetings, heavily involved in 12-step meetings for the first 5 years of my sobriety. Meetings multiple times a week, having a home group, sponsoring other women, holding service positions at district and state levels, the whole nine yards, just very heavily involved. Um, in When I moved from the town that I got sober in, I spent 4 years there and then moved for that graduate degree that I needed so badly that's advanced my career. Ha ha ha, right? It didn't. Um, when I moved to that city, I also got involved in a new home group and 12 step and the whole nine, but I also got involved with a new collegiate recovery community. There was one, and it was one of the first ones ever at Georgia Southern, where I got my undergrad. And then University of Georgia, where I got my graduate degree, also had a collegiate recovery community. And those are now way more common than they were back then. They were not common. It was a really cool thing. I got very heavily involved in the collegiate recovery community scene and started to pull out of the 12-step meetings a little bit more. These days, I love going to, there's a, in at Big Keller Williams events, which is the brokerage that I'm a part of. They have Friends of Bill W, which is like a code word, like a secret, like, hey, if you know kind of deal. I love going to those meetings, which are 12-step based. If I'm traveling somewhere, I like to go to a 12-step meeting just because I like to feel connected to the recovery community there, even if I'm not going to be there for a long time. But in full transparency, I'm not actively in 12-step where I go on a weekly basis with a home group or a sponsor at these days. So what I do though is I am very heavily routinized. I get up at the same time every morning. I have the same smoothie for breakfast every morning. I have a workout schedule 3 days a week that is regimented around strength training, and the other 2 days a week are yoga or walking, quiet guided meditation walking. Meditation is important to me. And I meet with a therapist that is very important to me off and on over the years, depending on what's going on in my life. Um, and I don't put myself in situations these days, 16 years in, that could shake the foundation.
Which there's so much overlap because, like we can all have impulse stuff for like, I mean, with ADHD, right? And I think, a lot of people out there as well, like impulse control and executive function, and then just like when you talk about playing the tape, right? We could have a different tape even if you don't have substance abuse disorder, but it's about like yourself or not, like about your future or things that don't feel good or going down, like just being down on yourself. And so I love what you said about like there's certain staples that keep you at a certain level where you're less like susceptible
Yeah.
to doing that and going there. And I think that makes a lot of sense. And there's like the HALT. Have you heard of that acronym?
Hungry and go
Hungry.
angry and tired.
If you're hungry, if you're angry, if you're lonely, if you're tired, you're less likely to be able to,
Absolutely.
right, and like regulate yourself, and so
Yeah.
you're more susceptible because maybe you overeat or you overspend or you chase dopamine or something, and maybe you're not uh, doing heroin, but you're doing those things. And I think there's a lot that we can learn from all of this as well. What So when you went through that recovery, and this is what I watch with my friends, right? You do that and then you get out of it, and like some people feel shame, right? And you are a very confident, empowered person that's inspiring to me. How did you shift that? And I think people with ADHD, even if you don't have substance, can relate to this. How did you shift the way you see yourself? Because to show up like this, because it's incredible. It's so inspiring what you do, and it's powerful. How did you do
Uh,
that?
it's funny because the again, I don't mean to bash this treatment center as badly as I am.
They're kind of, I get it. I've heard about them. They're
The
great until you move through them. Yeah.
it was a weird environment. So I did come out of that treatment center with like CPTSD, complex post-traumatic stress disorder. Genuinely, there was some weird stuff that happened there. And I was thrown. So I spent a year in a house with roughly anywhere between 9 to 13 other women, depending on how many other patients were in this house at any given time. And we did everything together. We did everything together. We went grocery shopping together. We weren't allowed to talk with anyone in the outside world for an entire year. And so when I came out of that, I was immediately, they were like, okay, it's time for you to go to college. Go to Georgia Southern. And if anyone is familiar with Georgia Southern, I did not know this going into it. Georgia Southern is a party school. It is a party school. It is known to be a party school. Um, and so to go from a very tightly controlled environment to a couple of hours a day, I was going to campus and trying to interact with like normal kids my age was uh, just bizarre. And especially early on, I'd be in like, I remember there was an English 101 class that I was in, and it was like Memorial Day weekend or something where we had a 3 day weekend, and it was early enough in the semester where the professor was like, we're going to go around the room and to better get to know each other, just remind us your name and say something cool that you did this weekend. And I'm going, oh my God, I live in a treatment center. I live in a treatment center with 11 other women. I can't, what am I supposed to share? And so the room, it's going around, and I'm just in a panic where I'm like, what am I supposed to say? I don't know what I'm going to say. And it finally got to me, and I was like, my name's Leah, and I live in a house with 11 other women, and we got a new girl this weekend. So that was cool. And then the professor's like, oh, are you in a sorority? And I was like, no. And she was like, oh, okay. Are you in uh, some other type? And I was like, no. And she was like, okay, moving on. So there was a long time that I was really not doing great in public and was just really socially weird and awkward, and felt very much like I had like a big like scarlet letter on my chest of I'm not like you people and I can't talk to you and I'm going to be really weird, so just buckle up, right? And a lot of that was, I had been using substances literally since I was 11. And from the age of about eighth grade until senior in high school, it was daily. It was daily and heavy use of heavy substances. And so a lot of it was just, you got to give yourself time to regulate and give yourself your brain time to carve new pathways and figure out how to talk with other people. And then eventually, as things got better and better and easier and life started to sort itself out somewhat, I never wanted to shy away from my recovery because there was a woman that at the time, I mean, she was 20 something, but there was a woman who came to talk to me when I was in inpatient about going to the long-term program. And there was like supposed to be like it's not going to be that bad, I promise, because she had gone through it. And I remember thinking like she was really cool. And she seemed like someone that I would want to hang out with, whether I was using or not. And it was the first person that I thought, well, she's not a lame. And so I wanted to kind of be a beacon, if at all possible, for anyone to be like, whoa, she did what? That's crazy because she seems to be doing okay right now. And so I've always just been, it's more important for me to be transparent than it is for me to try to protect some, fragile ego that I might have about my recovery.
Which then that shows up as confidence, right? Because you're real and confident, you believe in yourself. And then yeah, it makes a lot of sense. Do you ever experience like imposter syndrome or I know that's a big thing for a lot of us. I absolutely experience that.
Yeah, I have for sure. I have in many times over. I mean, my God, I did when I was in undergrad and first, getting out of rehab and trying to be a normal human felt way just felt like an alien, frankly, forget imposter. Felt like an absolute imposter in my master's program and that I needed to get the heck out of there quickly because they were all going to find out that I didn't know what the heck I was doing. Felt like that when I was early on in real estate. I was selling houses before I ever owned a house, right? Felt like that, right? Felt like that when I was first coaching, when I was first a director of sales for a team, like over and over and over. What has helped, and this is going to be a weird one. This is going to be a weird one, is a couple of things. I believe that I am the only person who has my experience in life. Just like Tyler is the only person who has Tyler's experience in life, and Blanca is the only person who has Blanca's experience in life. And so I am the only person who is able to bring my experience to the world. And so if I shy away from that, who am I comparing myself to? The other Leah Lemberg out there? Like, no one, it doesn't exist. And so I have to bring myself. I am the only me that there is. I have the only story that I have. There isn't another story that I get to tell. And therefore, because of that, I believe that there isn't, this is the weird part, and it's going to sound egotistical, and I don't mean it the way it sounds. There isn't anyone who's actually better than me. There are people who have different lived experiences that I absolutely can and should learn from. But I'm the only one that has my experience. And so therefore, there can't be anyone better than me because there's no one else to compare it to. Just like there's no one better than Jennifer. Right? It's weird. It's a weird philosophy that I hold on to.
I wrote that down. I don't think that's weird. I think you're right. Like I've never heard it put that way. You're so right. Because I mean, how can you compare yourself when it's a completely different experience, different brain, different upbringing, different environment, different stage, different age? Like it doesn't make sense.
And I say that I'm saying that with my full chest. I want you to know that it doesn't always feel that way, right? Like it's something that I have to remind myself of because of course we all get stuck in like the weird shadow talk of like, yes, but Tyler is actually better than you, or whatever. And you have to come back and be like, no, because Tyler's Tyler. And Tyler's amazing, but he's not better than me because I'm me and there is no other me, right? And I'm the only one that can bring this experience out into the world, period.
When they talk about ego, I remember that like ego isn't just I'm better than everybody, it's also I'm worse than everybody. Exactly. So it's like what I'm picturing is like ego is two sides of the coin. Like I'm not good enough, not in a shaming way if you feel this, because we feel this a lot, but it's like, yeah, and ego stands for edging God out. Have you heard that? So that makes sense because I'm not saying just whatever the belief is, if a universe or higher power, if that resonates for you, like there wouldn't be one that's cared about more than another. And so I think that makes sense. Like that's what this is the ADHD, how my brain just did that so rapidly and tied all that together. Yeah. Right? It's like if you think you're worse than somebody, if you think you're better, that's ego, not in a shaming way. And really what you just said, that's crazy. That's like my epiphany of the week.
we have this other phrase, and again, a lot of these 12-step phrases aren't unique to 12-step. It just happens to, this is where I learned them, is
Mhm.
alcoholics and addicts were egomaniacs with inferiority complexes,
Mm.
right? So like we think very highly of ourselves until we think very lowly of ourselves. And so it's finding that balance beam and remembering that again, it's just me. I'm the only one that's got this experience. So
Mm. So another question I think people might be able to relate to, and my friend said this too, is like there was grief after you get out of the
oh
substance
God.
abuse of like all the time you missed, and also it can kind of freeze development or like age, right? And so there was a grief of like all the years lost she had using, and I know for people with a late diagnosis,
Yeah.
there's even if you don't have substance, is like a grief of like I didn't know, and I'm 50 or I'm 60 or I'm 40 or whatever, and I didn't know, and I lost time because it would have been easier. I lost all this time. What did you do with that for you if you experienced that?
What's funny is, well, first I'll answer the question.
Mhm.
When I got sober, I have very few What I regret is that I literally was blackout for so many years. I have so few memories of key moments of my life of as a child, right? As from 12 to 18, it's just one big brownout, which is unfortunate, right? Because those are fun times, at least theoretically. I've been told they were fun times. So that's unfortunate. And my dad didn't get sober until he was 50, right? And so completely different experience there. And yet it's what's funny is you can always compare the other side of the fence. So like my dad's jealous that I got to get sober when I was 18. But there's times where my sick thinking will be like, ah, but I'm jealous that he got to use all the way until he was 50. So again, it's like one of those, your experience is your experience. And what you may have learned getting diagnosed later in life and having that struggle, which I don't want to denounce the struggle or say like, or just be like, no, that's no big deal. It's a struggle for sure. And yet that may help someone else. And it just is what it is. It's the only experience that you have. So rather than, pardon my French, rather than shitting on your own only experience that you have, it's you got to move forward. We have to move forward.
Mhm.
There are sometimes, again, I got sober when I was 18. I've never had a legal drink in my life. And I hope that remains that way. I've had plenty of illegal drinks, but I hope that it remains that it was never, I never have had a legal drink. There are times where I could be like, well, what am I missing out on? The drug scene has changed since I got sober 16 years ago. There's lots of things where I'm like, well, I could have that wasn't a thing when I was using. But it's the power of choice is choosing a decision and continuing forward with it. So if you've chosen to lean into your recovery or your routines around ADHD management or whatever that might be, just move forward. There's no sense in what did I miss out on? Well, it's done. What are you missing out on reminiscing about what you missed out on?
So I thought of something too, like the choice. That's so powerful. So with ADHD, a lot of us can have what's called demand avoidance, and
Uh-huh.
so it's really like a resistance to if there's some kind of demand. We did a call on this last month when we focused more on like autism and some of the stimming and things like that. And so an example of that is like if you're washing the dishes and your partner says, "Hey, I really need you to wash the dishes tonight," and you're like, "I'm not doing it now." Right? It's like, don't tell me what to do. And we can do it with ourselves. If it's too rigid,
Yeah.
if it's too structured, we're not going to do it. And so one of the key things, because we both coach, one of the things, but I specialize in the ADHD, is recognizing like uh, choice with demand avoidance. Like you have any choice,
Yeah.
and even though you're like you could do it, and so it's not that you have to, and there's a rule and it's absolute. It's you're choosing to do it, or you're choosing to do Legion, or you're choosing to go to bed. You don't have to. It's you're empowered versus like I have to do this.
Mm-hmm.
You could do anything. You could literally get in your car and go drive to Texas, like if you wanted to, or whatever. You could go to the grocery. You could eat whatever like we really have this unlimited choice, and sometimes it feels like we don't, and that can be more empowering if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. It absolutely does. Yeah, I joke around about that when I'm when I'm loafed on the couch at the end of a day and my husband's like, it's time for us to get dinner rolling, and we have equal parts roles in how we do dinner. It's, again, whatever part of my routine. And I'm like, I don't have to. I don't have to get up and put the potatoes in the oven if I don't want to. And
Right.
when a good friend of ours, actually, Tyler, Katie Prendergrass, right? We have this joke, she and I, about she coined this phrase that she calls them dishwasher tasks. And it's the stuff that, like, well, you can't empty the sink because the dishwasher's full. And so you got to empty the dishwasher before you're able to like move on to do the other stuff. And it
Hmm.
always seems like the dishwasher is going to take forever. Like whenever, I don't know if anyone else has this issue or if it's just me, but whenever the dishwasher's full, I'm like, God dang it. Like I have to empty the freaking dishwasher. And in my head, it's like this big roadblock, but it takes just a second. And if I just make the choice to do it, then I can actually do the other stuff. And there's so many dishwasher tasks in my head and in my life that like I'll build up to be this like, oh, I got to do this and I don't want to do this, but yeah, I got to. It just take the action. It's not
Hmm.
that bad.
Hmm. That totally makes sense. But what's your best advice for someone that's got a family member, a kid, or a spouse, or anything of like, what can you do if they're in active use right now?
It's first of all, I want to just tell you that I know how hard it is. I've been on every side of the addiction gamut except for parent, and I imagine that if I become a parent, I will probably experience that, just given again the genetic aspect of it. I have been the daughter of an alcoholic, the wife of an alcoholic in active addiction, the friend of. It's hard. The best advice is not the advice that people want. What people want is, how do I fix this person? And the answer is you cannot. The best advice that I have is, when there's an active addict or alcoholic in a family, the whole family gets sick. The whole family gets sick.
Mm.
And the best advice I would have for you is to focus on healing yourself. And I know that that is hard when there is an active fire that you can point at and go, but the freaking couch is on fire. What do you mean? You got to focus on yourself. One of the things that I still struggle with, from, and I call this an addiction aspect, or it's a character defect, is control. I so badly want to control everything around me. There's a line in one of the 12-step books that it's this whole little paragraph that talks about how the alcoholic is like the actor attempting to direct the other actors on the stage. And if he could just arrange the lighting in such a way and get them to do exactly what they want them to do, then everything would be fine. And that nails me to a T. If you would just, Tyler, if you would do what I told you to do, and do it how I told you to do it, when I told you to do, if everyone would just do what I want them to do, everything would be fine. Okay. And I do believe that's an adult child of alcoholic syndrome. And I do believe that that is an addict syndrome. And I do believe in general that is a human syndrome. It's not about letting someone hit bottom even. It is about, what can I do to focus on myself, because one of us has to stop doing the dance. So when there's two people or a family or whatever of addicts and their loved ones, the addict is doing a dance. We all have like a set routine that we kind of get into. And then
Mhm.
everyone around that person starts dancing around them and we all end up in these patterns that are so recognizable, where we're waiting for the addict to relapse. And when they do, we say the thing and and it's this dance like a wind up doll. And one person has to stop dancing so that the other person can figure out that they're also screwed up. And it's a lot easier if one person is stable. So if you have a loved one that is struggling and you are at a loss of how to help them, I would say, how can you help yourself?
Mm.
Right? Genuinely. And that's top to bottom. That is, how do I protect myself financially, physically? How do I protect myself mentally? There are Al Anon group meetings that are free and available in every city, in every city. Even in my hometown of 8,000 people, there's an Al Anon meeting that meets every single week, right? That is specifically for the loved ones of alcoholics and addicts. And they will welcome you with open arms, and you'd better be prepared that they're not sitting there whining about their addicts and alcoholics. They're there focusing on, how do I heal myself?
Which is amazing because what you just did, and it's like a lot of people, and I felt like this. I love that advice. I felt so helpless
Yeah.
because you can't do it for, you can't force somebody. I'd watch Intervention. Like, these were my best friends. They were like family to me. And I literally, one of my I never thought I'd get her back. It was like 5 or 6 years of
Yep.
just, I mean, and so I love what you said, because it actually gives us something we can do. Like, we
Yeah.
can work on ourselves. We can go to Al-Anon. We can, something we take action about. One of my really good friends that's now recovered in that amazing counselor, she talked about how it's like part of it was not just, getting off. It was like pain, like dealing with the pain, and one of the solutions was like community.
Hmm.
Like, connection was the antithesis of like
Addiction.
using. Would you be open to speaking to that?
Yeah, 100%. Again, I see this all the time. It's if you are in a healthy community, it is so much harder to foster an addiction, an active addiction. So much of active addiction is I am crap, I am bad, I am not worthy. It's never going to get any better. I'm a burden on the people around me. This is bad, like all these things. Or the opposite of like grandiose thinking of like everything's fine and everyone just needs to leave me alone so that I can do what I'm doing. There's a lot of pulling away to go do the thing that you are doing. My now husband, who is not the active addictive husband that I was talking about, and I were talking about how my using dreams, every now and then I'll still have using dreams, and I've never successfully using in those dreams. My entire dream is spent trying to get away from the people in my dreams so that I could go use by myself.
Mm.
That every single using dream that I have, the whole dream is just me trying to find a quiet space by myself. That's why genuinely 12 step is so powerful for so many people. Is yes, the step work is impactful and makes a huge difference and forces us to look at ourselves and carve some new neural pathways. But just being in community with other people who said, yeah, no, I totally get that. No, yeah, no, there's nothing that you could say that's going to scare me because I've been there. There was a counselor who was also sober at the treatment center that I was in, Edie. I don't think she's still with us anymore, but she was amazing. And we would sit in group and you would watch the light bulb come on with people because there would be things. There's a women's group that we were in that no one that no you would think to yourself like I can't share this around people. And you would say it finally and Edie would say, "Oh yeah, I've heard that before." Right? Yeah, yeah, I did that. It's fine. And that normalizing of like, "Whoa, okay. That's incredible." I'll say this too, especially with people. I have people nowadays that tell me, I cannot imagine you being the person that you describe. Like if I were to get into the gory details, it gets gory. And people are like, there's no way that that was you. And for me to be able to say to someone, yeah, I did that too. And for them to look at me and go, there's no way is hopeful too, which is why that community is so important. To this day, I tend to be a more antisocial person. And I can feel the effects of when I've gone too antisocial versus when I'm doing what I need to be doing. And finding a core group of particularly women that I can be very open and very transparent with about everything. And I mean, this is two women is wildly important. So community, if you're hearing that and going like, yeah, but I'm antisocial and I don't like community, it doesn't have to be like a big old, lock arms and we're going to go skip as a group through the tulips. It can be a person, two people who fully know you.
So yeah, these are such cool calls. Thank you guys. And then if we have a mastermind in our group call, if you want to do ADHD group coaching, so if you go to ADHDtyler.com, you can see our platform, our referral network. Like we've got a really cool crew every Thursday. So we've got a mastermind this Thursday about like thinking positive, right? In an ADHD format. So yeah, ADHDtyler.com if you want that. And so, yeah, we'll see you next week for part 2. Thank you again, Leah, so much for being on.
Looking forward to it. Yeah, thank you for
Yeah.
having me. If you need
Yeah.
me, DM me.